his ABCD. So it was one transparent. The process was very transparent. It was backed. The roadmap was backed by law. There was broad-based public participation, and the process was accountable. So there's a difference between the process through which Bill 10 was implemented and indeed that of Bill 7.
Yeah. Today, Honorable Brian Mundubile, you must have seen a statement from State House insisting that Bill 7 is so flawless, and they've challenged both you, the stakeholders, and citizens to point out which clauses among the 13 they're proposing is harmful or is bad for our country. And essentially, they are challenging that the constitution-making process is clean and people are being malicious. And I think this statement arises from the mindset of the president, who accused all the stakeholders last week that you merely do not like him. You hate him because of where he comes from and where he was born. Unfortunate remarks condemned by all. But if you see today's statements, they're literally saying the process is flawed and therefore the opposition is just being malicious. What do you say to that? Why are there so much concerns around Bill 7? I think we need to get to that emphasis.
Like I pointed out earlier, the process is as important as the content. So maybe before State House takes us to start discussing the content, the question that we have for President Hakainde Hichilema, who came up with those constitutional amendments? We want to understand, is there an emergency? Where was the outcry? Who actually came up with those particular clauses? That's a major question. Remember, Comrade Mwamba, that when you look at the Constitution, it's very different from ordinary legislation. A Constitution, besides being a power map, a Constitution is ideally there to discipline government. A Constitution disciplines especially dishonest governments. That is the reason why the Constitution Amendment Bill should not originate from government. That Constitution is supposed to be there to check the excesses in the exercise of power by President Hakainde Hichilema. But if we allow him to be the one to come up with a bill, then there's something wrong already. So before we even begin to itemize individual clauses, the question we have for President Hakainde Hichilema, who came up with those clauses in the Constitution? So it must be noted, Comrade Emmanuel Mwamba, that the process in this particular case is something that we started by questioning. This amendment process is supposed to be owned and driven by independent people, churches, civil society organizations, professional bodies, and among others. But in this particular case, the actual clauses, the amendment process, there's been no process, first of all, to start with. There was a jump right from the beginning. All that we received were clauses that were being presented for amendment. So the question is, who originated these particular clauses? So it must be noted, State House must be advised that, first of all, the process never seen before in this country. Even the time that we're criticizing the processes that were started by the Inquiries Act through commissions of inquiry, we found some shortcomings. And I think that in this wave of constitution making, which we are calling Wave 4, we inculcated certain values, certain principles, fundamental principles, immutable principles in constitution making, so that the interests and aspirations of the people that the Constitution is meant to save are safeguarded. But this was not done in this particular case of Bill 7. It must also be noted very early that at law, Bill 7 actually doesn't exist. Even as we discuss it, I must come out very early that after the Concord judgment, Bill 7 actually does not exist at law because the court ruled to say and decided that the process leading up to Constitutional Amendment Bill number 7 was actually unconstitutional. So in this particular case, yes, we have to talk about it, to try and defend our Constitution. But it must be noted also that even as we discuss Bill 7 actually does not exist at law. So before we talk about, say, delimitation, because Comrade Hamasaka would want to know, let's talk about delimitation. Delimitation is highly contentious. In this particular case, it's one of the clauses that are
Honorable Mundubile. Honorable Mundubile.
Constituencies.
Yeah, thank you.
We do not even know with this constituency.
Thank you, Honorable Mundubile.
We don't even know the basis of coming up.
I want to take a small break. I want to take a small break. Just I resolve just some issues of his. Honorable Mundubile, I want to take just a small break. I think we bring your microphone up. I monitor my broadcast live, and people are saying the volume on your side is a bit low. So I guess we'll lift your microphone a bit up. So let me just take a small break and allow the technical staff to do that.
You need to support it because you mayors, some of you have done 2 terms already. If we don't amend that constitution, you will be removed even though you are a good mayor or a good council chairperson. We are proposing that we should remove the term limit for council chairpersons and for mayors, you who are seated here, so that you can continue if the people want you, isn't it? As the councillor does, as the MP does, so is yourselves. Well, I can't hear you, but you're hearing me. So, the deferment of the constitutional amendment is not postponement.
Clearly, Bill 7 is up for sale. As you can see, the president threatening most members of, mayors and council chairperson whose mandate they've served 2 terms. They've limited terms like that of the president. The president there was telling them to, support Bill 7 because their term has come to an end. Let me invite Honorable Brian Mundubile once again. Honorable Mundubile, the matter, I think, has been to court. The Constitutional Court ruled that Bill 7 literally squashed it, that it didn't follow process, it was illegal, it broke so many constitutional clauses. Sadly and stubbornly, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Nelly Mutim, and the President and the Minister of Justice refused to withdraw it despite the court order. In fact, it appears that the process that has taken place of forming a technical committee, creating this so-called consultative process, coming up with a draft report and draft constitution, all of a sudden seems to be in vain because they've just relieved Bill 7 in Parliament. Just speak to this issue of illegality, because I heard you say, in fact, Bill 7 is dead. You made it very clear. Just elaborate on that.
In line with a court judgment, that was decided by the Constitutional Court, at law, Bill 7 is dead. Bill 7 does not exist. So when the Speaker of the National Assembly made a ruling, the sponsor of Bill 7 could actually represent it on the floor of the House. That seemed to have been a contradiction to the path that the President had taken. By that time, the President had already appointed, had started the process through the technical committee. So essentially, what we gathered was that when the President saw the court judgment, he realized that Bill 7 was actually dead, and he commenced a new process. What was expected out of the technical committee was that after their consultations, they were to produce, they were supposed to come up with a new bill, which bill was supposed to go through the normal process of being gazetted for 30 days before being presented to Parliament. But then we were suspicious when the Speaker and indeed the sponsor of that bill resisted the bill from Parliament. So this was a very unusual process, Ambassador. We had a bill in Parliament, but we also had a process surrounding that bill that was commenced by the executive. So this particular process was being dealt with by the two arms of government. Whilst the other bill was in Parliament but deferred, a process was commenced by the executive to try and consult citizens generally on this particular process. So the position the Speaker took contradicted the position the President took. The President in that case seemed to have realized that the earlier process was flawed and decided to start a new process by putting up this technical committee that will now go around to gather views and indeed contribute to this particular process. Whilst on the other hand, the Speaker was insisting that that particular bill was alive. Yeah, so we have now come to realize that the same bill, the dead bill 7, is the one that has been brought back to life through a very unusual process. We did not expect that bill to come back to the floor of the House in the same state as it was when it was declared to be unconstitutional.
Oh. You can proceed, Honorable Mundubile. You can. I can hear you.
Yes, I have just concluded on a point. I was submitting on the issue of the bill being in Parliament and resuscitated, the bill 7 resuscitated and presented back on the floor of the House, whilst on the other hand, the technical committee handed over a report to the President. The point I make there is that when you look at the move the President took, the President seemed to have agreed that Bill 7 was dead and decided to commence a new process altogether. And commencement of that new process was in line with the recommendations made by the courts, which were that the process needed a broad public participation. So we saw an attempt by this technical committee of going around the country to try and get views around these particular amendments. Of course, Ambassador, I must be quick to mention that even the way that the technical committee proceeded, not the correct way of going about it. You see, when amending the Constitution, first of all, the question that we ask is that we are dealing with clauses under Bill 7. Who came up with those clauses is a big question. Under normal circumstances, stakeholders meet. The first thing they do is to agree that there is need to amend the Constitution, as the case was in Bill 10. Stakeholders met and agreed that there was need to amend the Constitution. Once you have agreed to amend the Constitution, as stakeholders, you also agree on the extent, the scope of amendment. To what extent would you want these amendments to be? Once you have agreed, then you go further and agree on the design. You agree on the adoption process. You agree on the consultative process. You agree on the roadmap generally. Once you have agreed on all these, that is when you bring in government to facilitate the processes that have been agreed upon by the stakeholders. So ordinarily, even in the case of this technical committee, the misfortune is that the technical committee took the same Bill 7, just removed the numbering, and went to the same document to force it, upon the people to say, this is what we have, what do you think? The stakeholders were actually not given the freedom, the liberty to come up with what they thought needed to be amended. They still continued with the same clauses that President Hakainde Hichilema came up with. So even in that case, this was not the proper way of carrying out those consultations, or indeed, coming up with a new process altogether. It was the same Bill 7. So there was really nothing new, because the people that were consulted were not given the freedom to express themselves on what exactly they would have needed in the Constitution.
The elephant in the room is you've been privileged to be, leader of the opposition in Parliament. President Hakainde Hichilema and the UPND do not have the numbers in Parliament to pass this law. They have, I think, about 97 MPs. The Patriotic Front has 55 MPs, and we've got about 10 independents. You need 111 MPs to vote for this. So President Hakainde Hichilema appears and the UPND appear to bank on the goodwill of the independents and some members from the Patriotic Front. Earlier, before people even watched the broadcast, I was playing, as we're beginning, I was playing your very strong remarks against Bill 7. And you were rallying the troops that Bill 7 is harmful for our country. And I'll probably will play that video. There is fear from stakeholders, from Oasis Forum, from the members of the public. Even when we open phone lines, they'll bring this issue. This process will only pass because the Patriotic Front and the independents will have supported it. What is your view? What is the assertions? There's so many allegations that money is flying around. There are threats against certain members of parliament. There appears like if you don't take the carrot, you take the stick, vote for Bill 7. How much can Zambians trust in the opposition and the independents that we have in parliament?
Thank you, Ambassador. To start with, when we received information, we read something on social media, it must have been a week ago, that some members of parliament had received money from the UPN with a view that they support Constitution Amendment Bill number 7. In my capacity as the national chairperson for parliamentary affairs under Tonse, I got alarmed and I immediately assembled a meeting of members of parliament to address the nation. At that meeting, we came out very strongly to warn all those MPs who may have compromised and taken money from the UPND to support Constitution Amendment Bill number 7. We sent a very strong word because from the time that this particular bill was presented to Parliament, we've been engaging members of Parliament. However, we could not ignore the information that we saw on social media. So, Ambassador, I want to tell you that from that time, of course, as a leader, a national chairperson of parliamentary affairs, I have a duty. I have a duty to ensure that parliamentarians do what they have to do. They should do what they were voted for, and that is not to betray the people that sent them to parliament. So I have been engaging members of parliament one-on-one, especially some of those names that we've seen flying around on social media. I must tell you, Ambassador Mwamba, that so far, a few of those names that I've spoken to have made an undertaking. They've promised that they will not betray the nation. They'll stand firm in defense of the aspirations of the people that they serve. I did not get the permission to mention their names. Of course, in due course, I should be able to mention some of those names that are appearing on that list. So we have a duty. It's a call on all of us, the churches, citizens generally. These members of parliament are our representatives. They are there in parliament in their representative capacity. So I want to call upon Zambians. You must speak to all of us. Speak to your parliamentarians, the churches, the parish priests. Call your parliamentarians. Let them understand the need to stand with the people. So I can confirm to you, Ambassador, that yes, we are in active talks with some of those names that have come on social media, and I'm happy to report that quite a number of them have promised that they're going to remain steadfast and they will make sure that they don't betray the people that voted for them.
We saw last week the Oasis Forum organize public protests, but the president quickly held a press conference on Wednesday, discouraged the public protest and demonstration and called for dialogue. When that dialogue came, Just as many people feared, it didn't go anywhere. First of all, the president appears that he was not sincere, number one, because as soon as he held those discussions, he announced that he was meeting another group for him. And when he met that group on Monday, it was very clear that Bill 7 was headed for Parliament, and that the talks that Oasis Forum had engaged in appeared to be window dressing. And I'm glad that we have a video of Honorable Beauty Katebe, the chairperson, announcing that the dialogue that they had hoped would resolve, would prevent street protest, would bring the teams together and to bridge the gap that existed. The dialogue had failed. And the president has been dismissive that we should lobby you MPs. It's up to you. The matter of enactment of any constitution or any law lies with you, or we should go to court. But we have a background. There are allegations that, first of all, the president is shrinking the democratic space. This has been reported in international reports. There is controlling major democratic institutions such as Parliament, the Judiciary, Electoral Commission of Zambia, and others. Again, these are documented. So to refer you to court or to Parliament appears a mockery in light of the condition. There seems to be low trust by members of the public that Parliament is independent and can do the right thing, that the judiciary can do the right thing, as we saw the dismissal of that matter by a member of the judge who themselves have previously been accused of being close to the president. Oasis Forum has called for action from citizens and from stakeholders like you. Are you in any way engaging with institutions like Oasis Forum? Are you ready, other than your work in Parliament, to go to the street or to bring pressure to bear? Are there any thoughts around that particular matter?
Yes, Ambassador Mwamba, I want to confirm that we are going to use any constitutional means available to register our protests against Constitution Amendment Bill number 7. As a matter of fact, even that day when we gathered at the Cathedral for prayers, we were among the many Zambians that gathered there. And before that, as parliamentarians, we actually signed a social contract, the Oasis Forum. We have a partnership now in the fight against Bill 7. So there are quite a number of MPs that have signed. We did not present that particular list because some of the MPs were out of the country, others were out in their constituencies. We didn't want to present a picture that would appear that some of them resisted to sign when they were just absent in the actual sense. Yeah, so we are in that partnership. We are continuing to engage. And like I said, any legal possible to protest against Bill 7 will stand with the Oasis Forum. So let me be quick to also comment on the president's remarks where he says go to court, engage parliamentarians. Ambassador Mamba, we have what we call unconstitutional constitution amendments. So a constitution can actually be amended unconstitutionally. So it would be legally, it may be legally amended, but it will lack legitimacy. So what is important about a constitution? It should, first of all, be legitimate, it should be democratic, and also be durable. So it can only be legitimate, durable, and democratic if it's a constitution that is passed with a broad public participation. So what President Hakainde Hichilema is banking on, he banks bulldozing the numbers in Parliament so that as long as they meet the 111 threshold, the rest does not matter. Mr. President, it doesn't happen that way. A constitution must be legitimate. For a constitution to be durable, it must be legitimate. It must be democratic. People should freely participate because that constitution belongs to the people of Zambia. It must be one that takes into account the aspirations and interests of the people. So it's not enough for your government, Mr. President, to intimidate a few individuals entice individuals with some cash incentives to get to 111 and believe that you've passed a constitution. A constitution that's not legitimate would definitely be disastrous to this country. So, as opposed to referring to the courts and parliament, a modern constitution should be a product of a negotiated settlement. It should be a product of dialogue. It should be a product of consultation. Because when you look at the constitution, really, why should it be so hard that the president is now saying, go to court? All we are saying, Mr. President, that document, that constitution does not belong to you. It belongs to the Zambian people. If it belongs to the Zambian people, and you look around and look at the many stakeholders that have spoken against Bill 7, these are professional bodies, the churches, parliamentarians, citizens, right across the country. The levels of resistance should by now have persuaded you, Mr. President. You should have stood down to re-look at the position of Bill 7. In any case, the question that we ask, why are we in such a hurry? Why are we in such indecent haste to try and pass this particular constitution? There is no emergency as far as I'm concerned. There is no public outcry. The Constitution Amendment Bill number 2 of 2016 is the same constitution that was used when UPND came into power. So I do not think there's anything so urgent. If there was anything that urgent, then we should have seen that urgency during the time we attempted to amend the constitution using Bill 10. So the arguments the president used when fighting against Bill 10, when you watch the videos, then one wonders what has changed. When we talked about amending at 50, the president came out very strongly, against that, and many other proposed amendments. So if I told there was something very urgent at the time, the president would have brought it out. So the advice or the statement by the president that one should go to court or indeed go and persuade members of parliament should not stand in modern constitutionalism. In modern constitutional order, you endeavor to persuade each other. You negotiate, you sit down and dialogue, so that ultimately, given an environment, a conducive environment, and also give it enough time. So you start by ticking non-contentious clauses. There's been this argument, Ambassador, where somebody comes up and says the clauses we're bringing up are non-contentious. Every clause in the Constitution is contentious, including a comma. That's why it's in the Constitution. The aspect of a non-contentious item would only come after stakeholder consultations. So what would have expected, had President Hakainde Hichilema left this process for now, so that it's commenced at a later date, you can actually arrive at some consensus out of negotiations. That is the reason why a constitution amendment process is given enough time so that people are able to negotiate and agree on what should go in the constitution. So the mechanical approach that is being taken by the UPND government and the president is because of rushing this particular process, wanting to amend the constitution within 90 days. It's very, very unfortunate indeed.
Yeah. Before I transition to the issues affecting our country and the role of the current state of the Patriotic Front, the president made those unfortunate remarks, tribal remarks, that is just you people, we people, just do not like him because of where he was born. If he was excluded, he says all constitutional amendments in the past have been done in the election year. Why are we opposing him? We are just, prejudiced against him because of where he was born. Let me look for that video and probably play it. Then I invite your remarks to it, because his remarks went to the foundation of our country.
We were aggrieved as UPND, and I told my members, no one goes in the streets. Let's vote in parliament. We voted and lost in parliament. I never allowed our members to go in the streets. UPND, this man they don't like, for whatever reason. Right? You know, this level of hatred is shocking. Right? You can see that there's venom here. You can even touch it. There's venom here. We go to amend the Constitution using the same law, using the same Constitution, which was applied, clauses which were used before. It says, no, we don't want. The timing is wrong. But what about those other timings when it was amended? What was right? Why didn't you go in the streets? Ask yourselves a question. So you want to start conflict over nothing.
Uyu mulanda wine mwamupatafye. He cries. He says, you just hate him because of where he was born and who he is. What are your views, Honorable Mundubile, on those remarks?